guys, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I have my May wrap-up. So I read a total of 14 books in the month of May, and then I also have a DNF that we need to talk about. But otherwise, I'm pretty proud of myself just because I feel like I did get a lot of reading done since we are still sort of social distancing. I know a lot of things have started opening back up again at the end of May, but I wanted to make sure I was still trying to dedicate my time to reading. I did participate in the Medievalathon throughout the month of May, which this is how I did. This is just a little graphic of how many books I read, plus the different like outfits, weapons, and animals that I got from the different prompts. I'm not going to go over that too much, I don't think. I just want to sort of actually review the books that I did end up reading in the month of May. But I had fun with the readathon aspect, where it's more of like a story, building your character, that sort of thing. Like you get things for reading certain prompts, but you didn't have to read the prompts either. But yeah, I just had a lot of fun with that, and like I said, 14 books here. The first one I read in the month of May was For the Record by Charlotte Huang. This is a YA contemporary about a girl named Chelsea, which I have never, I don't think, seen my name as the main character in a story before, who ends up joining a band. I believe she's going to be going into her senior year of high school, so they're all basically teenagers, and it's her trials and tribulations as the main singer for that band. I went into this thinking that there was going to be a romance. I think because in the synopsis it does mention that there's a teenage heartthrob named Lucas Rivers who takes an interest in her. However, I don't feel like this was a romance. We did have a relationship in here, but there was none of the like actual romance tropes. It wasn't very loving, and that's not to say it was abusive either, but it was definitely like more of a coming of age story, learning what she actually wants, and that's what it was. I gave this a 3 stars just because of the fact that it wasn't what I really wanted. The writing style was fine, but I just didn't really connect to Chelsea or the other like main and secondary characters very much. There was a lot of talk in here about her weight. I want to say it's partially because it was a like band sort of atmosphere. However, I don't think that was the issue because she talks about her weight a lot, not even in the context of like the band. So it was just something that I found a little bit weird, but otherwise it was an okay story. The next book I read was The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. This is the second Riley Sager book I have ever read. I did read his Final Girls book last Spookathon. This one did complete one of my prompts. It was upside down, but it was to read a book with a murder. Obviously, this is a thriller type of book, so I assumed there was a murder in here. I wasn't wrong. This follows our main character of Emma, who 15 years ago went to a summer camp and her 3 cabin mates ended up missing, and then in the present day she goes back to that summer camp as it is reopened to try to figure out exactly what happened to the girls. I actually did like this better than Final Girls, although I think I'm still giving it 4 stars. I feel like Final Girls was probably like a lower 4. This is a higher 4. The ending was great. I really loved the way how everything just sort of pulled together near the end. And there were lots of twists and turns and red herrings, and like I said, I loved the ending, loved how it turned out. The reason it's not a 5-star for me is the camp aspect. Now, I'm going for modern day for this, as within the last couple years or so, like when this would have been published. So like 15 years ago would have been 15 years, let's say before, you know, let's say 2017 or whatever it was, so like 2002. I personally would have been around like 12. So I've been to summer camp before. I've worked at a summer camp before. And whether it was the 15 years ago or the modern day, none of the actual like rules and what you would expect to happen at a summer camp happened. I was especially not happy with it for the summer camp aspect in the present day, like the 15 years after the girls had gone missing, because 15 years ago, the girls had gone missing. So the fact that you knew that happened and you want to reopen your summer camp, you should have been having more rules and things to, you know, help not have girls go missing, or, you know, make it safer. However, our main character of Emma, she ends up going back as sort of an art instructor, and she on multiple occasions goes off and does her own thing, isn't watching the girls. There's one time where she basically takes these girls with her, does not communicate with anybody. And let me tell you, I've worked at a summer camp. You basically have to have a buddy system, so there should be no reason for people to be just wandering off and doing things. But also, you have to have a certain number of counselors with campers, and so there would be no way she could just get out of her duties and do whatever the hell she wanted, or take girls with her to go on her, like, quest to figure out what happened 15 years ago. So I got very annoyed with that. I'm sure that's how a lot of people feel like if they're watching movies or reading books in like the area of study that they studied. I didn't study summer camps, but I've worked at one. That is not how it happens. That aside, which was very prevalent for like the first half of the book or so though, that aside, I did like the actual mystery thriller part. The next book I read was Strangelove by Anne Aguirre. This I read as an ebook, and it is an adult sci-fi romance. I gave it 5 stars. This is one of my absolute favorite books. It is probably going to be on like my favorite books of the year list. I had originally seen it billed on Twitter as if Garrus and Femshep from Mass Effect had to compete in the Hunger Games. So of course I had to buy it. I freaking loved it. So basically this follows 2 main characters. One is Beryl, who is a human from Earth, and one is Xyler, who is an alien from another planet. I don't think I remember what species he is. Let me double check. Okay, I'm not finding it. But Xyler is an alien from whatever his planet is. I should have written it down somewhere like I try to do with the character names, because even though this is like one of my new favorite books, I don't remember the very specific like names of the planet, names of his species, and I'm very, very sorry for that. But in his world, they have sort of a mating, choosing ceremony, games type of thing. So that's where like the Hunger Games comes in. But basically they have trials in order to actually like come together and basically get married and mate sort of thing. So they have the women go through these trials that are partially for like maternal instincts and then partially for like combat. So there were some people very injured, and I think there was some deaths in there as well. And then after that, the men go through their thing and they have to, you know, decide who they want. I guess it's also like sort of The Bachelor. But this is a book that I just absolutely love the characters. I love the fact that Beryl, as our main female human character, was just herself. And she was very headstrong and knew what she wanted. She is completely taken to this like new world and galaxy, and she has to figure out what she wants to do with it. And then we also have Xyler, who has been passed over for the choosing of the mating thing like 4 times already. So this is his last chance. He's very down on himself because he does not see himself as a good mate because nobody has ever wanted him. So in his species, this is not something that I guess he is desirable. I absolutely loved our characters. I love the world. We are in a sci-fi setting, and because we are in like other galaxies with other races, we do have characters that have they, them pronouns. We do also have characters like Xyler who do not have human parts, obviously, but that was just a bonus. I am somebody who identifies as straight and demi, so I do need that like character connection from me to like the characters in the book to want to read sex scenes. But let me tell you, I connected to both Beryl and Xyler so much. The sex scenes were very, very hot, but like I said, they do not have the same parts that we do. So the fact that not only did I connect to the characters and really enjoy the sex scenes, which doesn't always happen, but also they're not human. I don't know how to describe it. It was great. There's also the added bonus of a talking dog. This is one of my favorite books. I really, really enjoyed it just so much. The next one we have here is my DNF for the month, and this is Charming by Elliot James. This is an urban fantasy, I guess I want to say, about John Charming, who used to be part of the Knights Templar, but he's lived for probably hundreds of years, and so now he no longer does that. He owns a bar, or at least works in a bar, and he tries to like help fight creatures of the night or something. I didn't get very far in this book. I was really hoping to like this. I've had this on my shelf for years. However, I found him very patronizing to the other, like the only other female character in here. They also made some very interesting comments about weight and sexuality for our female character. Like, I just did not connect to it. The writing style was also very long-winded. It's supposed to be from, I think, the point of view of John Charming, but he would go on these like rambling diatribes instead of getting to the point. There wasn't very much action in the parts that I did read. I think I don't remember, at least 50 pages in, possibly close to 100. I just got very, very bored and I didn't want to finish it. So the next book that I did read was actually an ARC from NetGalley, was Love Sold Separately by Ellen Meister, and this will be releasing on August 25th. This is a book that I requested a few months ago from NetGalley, and I did get approved 1 or 2 months ago. Finally decided to pick it up, and I think I was really expecting a romance, especially with this cover and title. However, it's not really. There is some romance in it. However, it definitely felt very rushed, and I didn't really see why we had the romance. It definitely, I don't want to say insta-love, because they didn't really fall in love right away, but it was put on the back burner so much that when they sort of got to the end, that felt rushed, because they weren't in love, and we didn't really get to see the development of it. Instead, this book felt more like a cozy murder mystery. Our main character is Dana, and she is sort of like an actress. She just got fired from Hot Topic, and she ends up with an interview for the shopping channel. And she apparently has an eye for detail, almost like Sherlock Holmes. And so she pretty much nails her audition. And then on her first day of work, one of the main high stars of the shopping channel ends up shot to death. And so then the rest of the book is basically Dana trying to figure out the whodunit. I did not fully find it believable in the fact that she notices all these tiny little details, which I guess that wasn't the most unbelievable part. The unbelievable part for me is that she would then notice these things and then bring in like 5 to 10 other people to talk to them about it. People that could be suspects. So she was just spouting off all of her conclusions for like the tiny little bits of things to people that could have been the person who did it. I will say the actual sort of whodunit was interesting. I did have some little bits and pieces that I guessed close enough. Some of them were right, some of them were very close, some of them were wrong. So I did enjoy that part, but I just didn't feel like it was super believable for Dana to have been the person like really figuring everything out, just because she couldn't keep her mouth shut. And because of that, I did give this book a 3.5 stars. Also, I read The Chalk Man by C.J. Tudor. This one also has a little thing in here that was again upside down. This was to read a book released in the same month you were born. And so this was released in January of, I think, 2018. And this one I gave 3 stars. This I really assumed, I don't know if it's because of this Stephen King blurb or some of the other stuff I had seen about it, but I really assumed it was going to be more horror, a little bit more scary than it was. This ended up to me feeling more just like a domestic mystery. Basically, we follow a man named Eddie, both in the past, like at the time of the murder thing, the body that they found, and then also in the present day, which is like 15 years later. What is it with 15 years later? I don't know. Let's see. So one of the years was 1986, and then the other year was 2016. Not 15 years, about 20 years. So we are following Eddie in both timelines. In the 1986 timeline, him and his friends are, I believe, in elementary or middle school, and they start drawing chalk men because it was a fun thing to do. However, one of the like bullies found out about it, so they stopped doing that. However, chalk men start appearing when people start dying. There's a couple, I want to say 2 to 3 dead bodies in this book. And then in the present day, we just go back and forth between Eddie sort of then and Eddie now. One thing I will say based on the writing style that I didn't fully like is that we do have those 2 different time periods. However, the 1986 time period is told from Eddie. However, it's like Eddie's telling us what happened, so it almost feels like everything is set in 2016, and then he's looking back to the 1986 part. Wait, that's 30 years. My math. 1986, 2016. Not 20 years. 30 years. 30 years. But, so it's like he's looking back to the 1986 part, and so he is only telling us what he wants to tell us. I think it's so that it feels more mysterious as we go through. But again, it's like a domestic thriller. It was basically all about this small town and what happened that summer with like the couple dead bodies that there were. There wasn't a full-on mystery. The ending, like the last 5 pages, was the most interesting part of the whole book. That's why I only gave this 3 stars. And then also they did use the slur for Romani people quite often. Not only in the 1986 part, but also in the 2016 part, because again, it just felt like Eddie telling us about what happened in 1986. So like talking from the 2016 era, talking about 1986. And this book, like I said, I think was published in 2018. I was right. So I don't see why we're using racial slurs in this book, especially with your character that is from like 2016 as well. Like it was just something that was definitely used. I was hoping for more. It wasn't that creepy, it wasn't that scary, and yeah, 3 stars. Then I read another NetGalley arc. This was for Blue Flag Volume 2 by Kaito. I read the first one a couple months ago from NetGalley. Really enjoyed it, 5 out of 5 stars. So when I saw that they had Volume 2 up, I had to read that as well. I definitely need to buy these eventually because I want them for my manga collection. They are so good. I also gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I can't really fully go into the summary of this one either because of the fact that this is the 2nd book in a series, but we do follow Taichi, who is basically trying to help Futaba confess her crush on Toma, who is like an older friend of Taichi, and there is a love quadrangle in here, so some of the characters are LGBTQ, some aren't. I've just been really loving the relationship aspects, like the friendship aspects in this group of people. I will say, Volume 2 ended on the biggest cliffhanger I think I've ever read. Like, I could not believe it. And so I need Volume 3 as soon as possible. Loved this volume, but come on, people. I need Volume 3. And then I don't think I specified, maybe? NetGalley arc, this one is coming out June 16th. Next, I reread Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I read this last year, reviewed it last year, gave it 5 stars. I just absolutely love this book and this series. This is a book that I like to bill as sort of a mix between like Mass Effect, Firefly, and Star Trek. It's just in a sci-fi world. We do have other species in here as well. This one follows a group of teenagers because Apparently it's better to be a teenager in certain parts of the fold in space than it is to be older, who are basically the last hope of the entire galaxy after finding Aurora, who had been in the fold, which is like a weird temporal space thing, for like 200 years. There is lots in here that I can't really get into, but I absolutely loved it. If you've read their Illuminae files, obviously it's slightly different because this is told in an actual like book prose format, but I still love it just as much. And then I did also then read the sequel, which came out in May for Aurora Rising, which is Aurora Burning. This one I gave 4.5 stars. I liked it a lot. I didn't quite like it as much as Aurora Rising. The only thing I will really say is that I didn't like the echo parts. If you've read this book, you know. And I didn't like Cal's point of view, which is a little sad because he's on the cover, as much as some of the other characters. I did like a lot of the character growth that we saw though in this book. We got to know them a lot more. And this one also ended on a really, really, really big cliffhanger. So I need the third book of this one. Then I read A Flower in a Field of Lions by Ryan Cody and Tyler Button. This is a graphic novel about Joan of Arc. From my understanding, and I did read this and everything, but from my understanding, this is basically like a not fully fictionalized version, but like in the fact that like we probably don't know exactly what everybody was saying, of the events of Joan of Arc. It shows us her main goal and everything of getting the King of France, king to the King of France during some sort of war. I have to admit, I don't fully remember all the little details even now. The first part of this was like info dumping about the war, but it's between like England and France, and she was helping get the King of France, king to King of France. It is being looked at in this from her like trial, as a false prophet or something. It's a trial from the church. I am not a big history buff and I'm forgetting a lot of this already. I gave it 3 stars because of the fact that it was just very sort of like, here's an event, here's an event, here's an event, here's an event. It was a little bit dry. I did find it a little interesting that part of the reason that they convicted her was because she wore men's clothes, and apparently that was against God. But yeah, just sort of middle of the road. Then I read That Blue Sky Feeling by Okura. This is volume 3, and this is the final volume in this series. There was only 3 volumes. I did give this a 4 stars. This series in general follows our main character of Noshiro, who finds out that there is a rumor that Sanada is gay, and in the first volume, we do find out that that is not a rumor, it is true, but a lot of people just think it's a rumor. And this is set in Japan, so there is a lot of people sort of making fun of if he is gay or not. And the one thing that I really did enjoy about this series is it also has Noshiro sort of questioning his sexuality through it, because he had never considered liking a girl or a guy either way, and so it's definitely just like a coming of age story. It's definitely more about friendships than romance, and I just really enjoy it. The reason it is 4 stars, I think every single book in this series was 4 stars for me, is there is a character in here who in the first book we do find out is Sanada's ex-boyfriend, and he is like 10 years older than these kids. I believe they're like 17 and he's like 27. My husband's 10 years older than me, but I didn't meet him until I was 20 something and he was like 30 something. I feel like we were mature. A 20 something year old going out with a kid from high school creeps me out, grosses me out quite a bit. That's why I'd take it down a whole star. There's nothing overly sexual or anything in this book series at all, so it doesn't fully seem bad. However, I don't like it. So yeah. Then I also read Want by Cindy Pon, and this one we had read a 1-word title book. This card was originally for Charming, which I did not finish because we talked about that. So I read Want instead. This is a futuristic book where our main characters are in a futuristic Taipei where there is a divide between the rich and the poor classes. The rich people can afford these like specialized suits that filter out the pollution and have like coolers in it or whatever it is, whereas the poor people do not have these kind of things, have to just live in the poor neighborhoods with all the pollution. And I believe it said that their life expectancy is closer to like 40 something years instead of, you know, higher than that. I was expecting to like this a whole lot more than I did. I think I gave it 2 stars. This is supposed to be like almost like a heist sort of book. Our main character of Jason, Joe, is supposed to like infiltrate the elite society in order to bomb the place that makes these suits, take their computers offline so that the rich people have to experience what the poor people experience, and then hopefully there will be like legislation passed to clean up the pollution. None of that happened until like the last 30 pages of the book maybe. It took forever. There was an unnecessary romance that I did not feel any connection to whatsoever, and so even though it's only like 300 something pages, I was bored for a lot of it. Once the action-y stuff with the bombs and stuff happened, the very next chapter they were forgot about. It didn't seem to have any sort of meaning or gravity to the situation whatsoever, and so yeah. Then I read another NetGalley ebook. I read Again Again by E. Lockhart. This book is actually being released on June 2nd. This is a contemporary-ish story by E. Lockhart. I had previously read her We Were Liars, really enjoyed that. And so when I saw this on NetGalley, I was like, ooh, let's, you know, try this out. I did not enjoy it. Basically, we follow our main character of Adelaide, who had just broken up with her boyfriend, and she is now spending the summer with her dad because there was a family issue, so her mom and her brother are doing something else. She's with her dad, and it's about her sort of falling in and out of love. However, that's not entirely true. It had a very interesting premise where we would sort of get instances of alternate realities, I think it's what it's supposed to be, of like possibilities of what could happen based on the situation. However, I didn't fully understand what was happening with a lot of that. Some of it was like, okay, I could see this happening, and then a lot of it was just, it seemed very out of left field. Like, some of the possibilities were like over-exaggerated, at least in my opinion. I also did not like the writing style in this one. It seemed to go from very, very short, abrupt sentences to very poetic, sometimes written in verse, so it was just all over the board. Part 4 of this book was completely different than the first 3 parts, and so I was just very confused. I actually liked part 4 more, and the fact that it was part 4 out of the whole book, there was only 4 parts, so it was maybe a quarter of the book total, meant that it was written in such a way that it was very quickly gone through because we had sort of gotten parts of it in the first 3 parts. So I almost wish it was just part 4 expanded upon and written out. But yeah, I gave this book 2 stars. I was very disappointed in it, and yeah, I was confused. Then I read Anna Dressed in Blood by Kendara Blake. This is the book that I got from doing the scavenger hunt to find my next read. I will leave that video linked down below, because even though you now know what that book was, I had a lot of fun doing it. But this is a book that I've had on my, I think my Goodreads want to read list since like 2012. This is like an early 2010s YA paranormal type of book. And I wasn't too sure how it was going to hold up. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It actually held up pretty well. So basically this follows our main character of Cass, who is a teenager, but he has taken up sort of like his father's business of killing ghosts. So in this sort of world, the bad ghosts are people that have usually been killed or something, and even if they were a nice person in real life, they twist and they want people to feel their pain, and so a lot of them end up killing people. So he then goes in and kills them again to, you know, fix that's the problem. So in this book, he ends up moving to a town in Canada where Anna dressed in blood lives so that he can take care of her. She is somebody that apparently every single person who crosses her doorstep, she kills. However, she does not kill Kaz when she has the chance. So that is a very intriguing aspect for him. She's also a very, very powerful ghost, and it's basically him figuring her out and trying to take care of the problem. Like I said, I actually really, really enjoyed this one. I do have this sequel, I think Girl of Nightmares, as well. I don't know exactly where it's gonna go after this one, and I do want to say this is definitely sort of like a horror-y paranormal. People died. Some of it was in very, very gross ways, but I was very intrigued by this. It kept me on, you know, the edge of my seat the whole time. I needed to know what happened. And so yeah, overall held up really, really well, 4 stars. And then the last book that I read is another NetGalley e-arc, and that is going to be The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. This one is going to be releasing on July 14th. I believe it was originally supposed to be in June sometime, but with COVID it got moved back. And this one follows our main character of Nick, who has ADHD, and it's all about him being obsessed with extraordinaries, which are basically superheroes in their world. So they do have some people that have extraordinary abilities, superpowers, and in his town, I believe there's like 1 hero and 1 villain. I don't think there's currently any other ones in his town, and so it's all about that. I really did enjoy the story as it progressed. I do think it was a little hard to get into for me personally because Nick's ADHD is very, very prevalent in the writing style. So it's a little bit weird at first because he definitely goes back and forth the way he talks, and like sometimes his train of thought is not something that I would have assumed. Like it doesn't go in necessarily very logic order sometimes, but I did get used to it after a while, and sometimes he is just hilarious to me. I found myself laughing out loud quite often. Nick is also oblivious. So this book is told from Nick's point of view, like 3rd person point of view, and he is very oblivious. So much so, in fact, that I do believe us as readers are supposed to understand a lot of what's going on before Nick does. So where were we before the baby had cried? I believe it was about Nick being oblivious. We are from Nick's point of view. However, since it is a 3rd person point of view, I do believe we are supposed to understand a lot more of what is going on and get it before Nick does. I did give this book a 4 out of 5 stars, mostly just for getting into it with the ADHD stuff and for how long it is. I don't know if it's because of the way Nick talks or if it's because of the fact that we are supposed to understand a lot of what's going on before Nick does. I just felt like it took a little while to get to the actual point of the book, but it did set up very, very well for the sequel, because I know there's supposed to be at least 1 more book coming out, and I'm very excited for that one. And then finally, this is not a book I read, but I did want to address it really quick. I did not read Autobiography this month. And the reason I'm mentioning it, besides this is the first month I haven't read a book that I put on my TBR this year, which is great, but it did have a prompt, read a book with another book on the cover, and I didn't fulfill the prompt. So I'm going to be moving this book prompt into June with one of my June books. I will have to figure out what book I want to read. But I am still going to complete this prompt even though I did not get to it in May. That's all I wanted to say. So those were all of the books that I did read. I was quite proud of what I accomplished, and if you guys liked this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more videos. I do have videos up Mondays and Thursdays, so I will see you then. Bye!